Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling host JP and John Paz. With me today, a very special guest. He was a wrestler for WWE and OVW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. He was an MMA fighter in UFC and Pride. He's the H2O man himself, Ron Waterman. What's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So what's going on in your world? What are you up to? It seems like you're on a different path these days than than the world of wrestling and fighting.
Yeah, a little different path for sure. I've been a firefighter now, a firefighter paramedic for the last about 15 years. Own a real estate company, and I do a lot of traveling the world and sharing the gospel with a Christian strength team.
Man, and you have a book too, right?
And I have a book, yeah, called "Tapped Out by Jesus: From the Cage to the Cross." Got one right here, I think.
Nice. Perfect. Look at that. I like that. Man, that's kind of an interesting journey. Think about it, right? I mean, you're going from cage fighting, you're going from MMA to wrestling, and then basically, not only helping physically, but now you're, sharing your faith. So I mean, completely different path than wrestling.
Yeah, I was a young Christian when I joined the WWE clear back in 2000. So it was kind of a rough couple of years for me traveling in that environment and being exposed to all the things that you are as a professional wrestler, um, and I just felt the call after a couple of years in the WWE that that's not where God wanted me, and called me out, and I started traveling the world right after that with another great group of Christian guys that travel the world and get to share their faith. So I've been doing that for almost last 25 years now.
Does that help the wrestling as far as not only like talking to everybody, but them kind of knowing who you are? Does that help?
Absolutely. And I think that was God's plan all along, is to give me a platform when the UFC and the WWE and that exposure. And so when I go into a high school now and start talking to the kids, many of them, especially a while back, know who I was. Maybe their parents know who I was now.
Were you always like strong in your faith, or was something where like the wrestling world was like, oh, this is crazy. I need more stability.
Yeah. I was 32 years old when I came to faith. So spent a lot of my young adult life just working for trying to find my spot in life and chasing after dreams, and ended up finding a lot of that stuff through my journey, and lived in the $1 million house and drove the $100,000 car, and just found out that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And I needed the Lord in my life. So he found me at 32.
How does he find you though? Because I know so many people have different stories. That this happened, that happened. So how does he find you?
I actually had my father invited me back to church, and he'd been inviting me for years, and I was like, man, I don't have time for 2 hours at a church service on Sunday morning. So turned him down and turned him down. But man, at 32, had just reached a point in my marriage and with my family that, man, I was just at a miserable spot. So I finally took him up on his offer and went back to church with my dad one day. And man, the Lord just spoke to me when I was sitting in the pews that day. I felt like he was just talking to me directly, and felt something I'd never felt before, and knew it was my time. And the pastor said, if you don't have a relationship with the Lord, I invite you to do that right here. And I said a short prayer and walked up to the altar and gave my life to Jesus, and the rest is all history. But it's been an amazing ride since then.
When you do the motivational speaking, the speaking engagements, do a lot of people ask you about wrestling and fighting? Is that most of the convo? They want to know about your crazy life before this?
Yeah, a lot of it is. Of course, they know me for this professional wrestler and this ultimate fighter that's beating guys up in the cage, um, and I just let them know, God uses people in all walks of life, and I think that that's where He wanted me at that time, and called me out of that when it was time to call me out of that and start ministering full time. So I've been a youth pastor since then, um, and still get to travel around and speak to hundreds and thousands of young people all over the world. So it's been a real blessing to get to share my faith.
Do you think if they didn't know about you having this career, like would they be like you said, it almost gave you the pedestal. It almost gave you, if they didn't know about your prior career, are they going to be calling it? You know what I mean? It's almost like it worked
Yeah,
in God works in mysterious ways. It almost worked out in your favor big time.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it definitely helps when you've got that platform to stand on. And I was traveling around with a group called, it was called Team Impact, and made up of professional football players, bodybuilders, power lifters, world strongman competitors. So we all had some kind of an athletic background that we were known for. So when we would step into the schools and start a program, and they would hear a little bit more about where we came from and our backgrounds, it just draws their attention a little bit more. So they're listening a little bit more attentively when we get to share our faith with them. So they just a beautiful platform to share
Does seem
from.
like definitely, and it seems like a lot of ex wrestlers kind of go down that path. Maybe they went down a really dark path, or
Right.
living on the road all those years and maybe doing some crazy stuff. Feels like a lot of wrestlers kind of are headed in that direction, more towards faith.
Yeah, it's such a hard career, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it's just that kind of a lifestyle. You've got groupies knocking at your door at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're beat up from the match, so the only way that you can survive and get to the next match is taking some painkillers or some muscle relaxers to make it to the next day. And it's just such a crazy world to live in. And then you're chasing money, and you've got all the materialism of the world and all that on top of you. So to stay in that lifestyle is hard. And I commend some of these guys have been able to do it for years, like the Undertaker. But it's been so exciting just to see, like, Taker in the last year has given his life to Christ, and hearing his testimony, and Hulk Hogan hearing his testimony as of late. It's just a beautiful thing to see that them come first full circle now and get faith in their life, because they figure out, it's not all the materialistic things in this world that bring you happiness. It's when you find the Lord, and that's where it's at.
And sometimes those materialistic things and like the groupies and everything else bring you nothing but trouble. Actually, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just,
You think it's that's what you want. In my book, I wrote, living for the 3 Gs: gold, glory, and girls. And I thought if I had those 3 things, I would be set. What else would I need? But after achieving all those things and having those things at your fingertips, you feel like, man, there's got to be something more. And there's never enough. And you're always striving for the next level and wanting the next bigger thing, and a bigger house and more women and more fame and more glory. And you never get to the top.
it's just a crazy world, the wrestling world and MMA. I always ask this to, guys like Boss Rutan and Ken Shamrock and Severn and Fry, like guys that did both, did wrestling and MMA. What is actually you think harder? Because I was shocked at some of the answers, because you think automatically everyone would say MMA. Boss Rutan, like without even hesitation, was like pro wrestling. I'm never doing that again. I hate bumps and blah blah. So what's harder, pro wrestling or MMA?
They're just two so different worlds. You're in control of your own destiny in MMA. You train for you put a camp together, and you train for 3 or 4 hard months for a fight that's coming up. And it's definitely hard. I mean, you're getting beat up in practice every single night. Um, but you're in control. You get to protect yourself. But in the world of professional wrestling, there's no seasons like football and baseball and all the other things. It's year round, and you're going night after night after night, and you're hoping that your partner that you're competing against is going to protect you when you're jumping off the ropes onto the concrete, from the third rope up high, and you're doing a backflip down on the concrete. And if he's not where he's supposed to be, man, you're hitting the floor, and you get beat up, and you aches and pains, and you're just constantly beat up. So when you hear about these guys, overdosing on painkillers and stuff, man, I can relate to that, because I know what it takes to be able to survive to get to the next day. And it's brutal. Just that, and it just beats you up going from town to town and hotel to hotel and arena to arena, that they all just blend together after a while. You don't even remember where you'd been last. Just living that lifestyle. And, I had these great intentions when I went into the WWE, thinking, I'm going to be home with my family all the time, and I'm going to get to share the gospel with these guys, and it's just going to be such a great experience. And man, it just beats you up and tears you down. And the guys in that environment, at the time when I was in there, it wasn't a lot of people with a faith. So man, I was just so outnumbered that I felt like, man, what am I doing here? And it was so hard. So after a couple of years of that, man, I just knew that this isn't where I'm supposed to be.
When you think about it, like getting in, did you think that wrestling was going to be not easy, but did you think because you have an athletic background, because obviously like legitimate like tough guy, did
Yeah.
you think it was going to be easier on you?
Oh, I thought it was going to be totally different than it was. I'm like, professional wrestling, how hard can this be? I can do all this stuff. I was looking in there and watching guys like Kurt Angle and some of these great wrestlers. I'm like, man, I can do this because he did that. And there's just so much more to it than the average Joe on the street realizes. Um, the physical part of it is crazy hard, but then the mental side of it is even harder. Like trying to make this a match out of this, and remembering all these spots and knowing exactly what to do, and you've got different opponents every single night, and keeping each other safe. And man, there's just so much of the mental aspect that goes into that, having charisma, and man, it was just way more than what I expected that it would take to be at that level, especially.
Were you a fan at all of wrestling? Did you like it at all?
I loved it as a kid. I remember going to uh, the Denver Coliseum as a kid, watching Hulk Hogan, and always one of my people that I looked up to, and then get to meet him and travel with him and with Dwayne Johnson. And it was kind of surreal at a lot of different times in my life, walking backstage and getting to talk to those guys and travel with them and spend time with them and go to the gym with them during the day. And it was a neat experience. It really was. And it was a fun chapter in my life for sure.
Did you want to be a wrestler when you were younger, or that wasn't really a thought?
I did. I always wanted to be a wrestler, but I was like, man, I have no idea how to get my foot in this kind of the door. I was a college wrestler, went on to be a high school wrestling coach, and then my team talked me into getting into a tournament called the Boss Rutan Invitational down in Denver. They talked me into it. I trained for a couple of months and entered this tournament, 3 fights in one night. I ended up walking through all 3 fights pretty fast. And John Peretti, who was the matchmaker for the UFC at the time, was the official and invited me right to the next UFC. So I win my first UFC fight in about 20 seconds, and everything just kind of exploded. And I ended up getting asked to be in the first video game for the UFC on PlayStation and Dreamcast back then. So I'm flying out to California to be put in this video game where they put electrodes all over your body. And I'm sitting next to this guy, and he goes, "Have you ever thought about professional wrestling?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I always wanted to be a professional wrestler when I was a kid." He goes, "Well, I actually know a guy, and he was good friends with Shane McMahon." So he sets up a meeting with Shane and I. The next week, I fly out to Stamford, Connecticut, and sit in the boardroom with him and Jim Ross and all these executives. And sure enough, they offered me on the spot a developmental deal for 4 years. And the rest is history. I took him up on it and flew out to Louisville, Kentucky for OVW, and walk into this little beat up old room and walk in there, and you got Mark Henry and the Big Show's down there training, and Cena and Batista and Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin, and this room full of giants, and worked my tail off for over a year to make the main roster and get called up.
It is crazy thinking about that OVW roster at that point, because so many, even Randy Orton too. I mean, there's so many
Yeah,
awesome guys down there.
all at the same time. We were all in the same class and traveled on our little circuit that we had down there, and set up the ring twice a week and did our own little house show every week. And it was an amazing time. It was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work too. And I had to move away from my family, who was here in Colorado, to live down there. I thought it would, 6 months or so, and then I'll get called up, and it ended up being about a year until most of the guys got called up to that traveling roster and got to start traveling.
So are you in UFC while you're training for OVW as well? Like, are you doing both somehow?
No, Vince wouldn't let me do both. They actually did let me do the video game, and then they asked me to be in the second video game, and Vince was like, "Nope." That was before, just like the UFC's just starting to gain some momentum and get some
Yeah.
popularity. Shamrock was already had already wrestled at that time and had just quit when I got asked to come in. But yeah, he wouldn't let me do both. And then when Brock came along a few years later, they let Brock do both. But at the time, I mean, you're
Yeah.
you're Vince McMahon's and nothing else.
So when you're in UFC, like right before that, 2 1-1, right? Like you had 4 fights and then boom, you're gone. Like, is that basically the gist of it as far as UFC career?
Yeah, that was it for the UFC and the next 2 years. And then when I uh, quit traveling with the WWE, I went back and started fighting over in Japan for Pancreas and then Pride Fighting Championships, and it kind of started the ball rolling. I came back here and became a WEC super heavyweight champion a couple of times, and started just traveling back and forth, and did the New Japan Pro Wrestling thing for just a little while.
Man, it's
But
just fascinating, like how quickly, like you're going from one to the other, right? I mean, that's a little bit of an adjustment.
yeah, and I mean, I was a college wrestler and wrestled my whole life, so training and you didn't even have camps back then when I was doing it. So I was traveling around. Half the time I was traveling with my strength team, and I would just have these big 300-pound guys rolling with me on the mats during the week, trying to get me ready for a fight that was coming up. But it worked out real well. I mean, had a pretty successful career with only 6 losses and 16 wins, and had some pretty high caliber fights under my belt. So I was real happy with my career.
He fought some big names for sure. Even TK, the infamous
Yeah,
TK, who yeah, controversial win over Fedor, but he obviously a legend in MMA.
absolutely. Yeah. Crow Cop and Kevin Randleman
Oh
and
yeah,
Rico Rodriguez and lots of big names. And it was a fun ride for sure. I mean, I enjoyed it and made some pretty good money at the time. As a super heavyweight, you always got paid more than all the little guys. So fought Gracie over in Canada, and it was a good experience for sure.
when you do fight for UFC and then go WWE, is the money that much more from WWE that UFC is like out of the equation for you?
Say that again.
Like basically UFC, they're not UFC that we know at this point, where they're
Right.
probably paying a little bit better. Was WWE paying better at that point to train with them than UFC was paying?
Yeah, I got paid a lot more in other organizations than the UFC was paying me for sure. Um, and back then, I mean, we were just trying to climb up the rope. But even the top heavyweights, the top guys that had belts at that time weren't making crazy money, not even a fraction of what they make now. But at the time, it's all relative. It was pretty decent money for me.
UFC, I mean, people now think of it as like the global leader of MMA and everything, but back
Right.
then, not even close. I mean, it was good to a point, but Pride was really the leader and the number one, and where you'd make your huge money because UFC wasn't as big then.
Right. Two completely different environments too. It was so fun to fight over in Japan because they just respected it so much more than here in the States with the UFC. I mean, I'd fight over here and for the UFC, and they just want to see blood, and you'd standing on your feet throwing punches, just killing each other. And over in Japan, I mean, you could hear a pin drop in the middle of your match. You do something respectable and you get a little golf clap, from the crowd, but they just respected the sport so much more over there. And man, you get treated like a king over there. They roll out the red carpet for you, put you in 5-star hotels. And I mean, it's just first class the whole way.
And it seems like the rosters were a bit better too. I mean, they're probably paying a little bit more. They're probably getting the better talent. It just seemed like that was where everybody who with anybody would really want to go if they want to be elevated in MMA. I mean, is that why you kind of wanted to go out there too? It's like, man, this is like the best of the best out of here.
Yeah, and I had a manager at the time. Her name was Phyllis Lee, and she had a lot of great Japan contacts. So she immediately made some contacts for me and set up some fights over there. And then once I fought over there and started to get a name for myself in Japan, the fights just started to come one after another, and I found myself in Japan quite a bit.
Got a win over Overeem's brother too for Pride over there in Japan.
That was a big fight for me, and a good win. I had Mark Coleman in my corner for that one. It was kind of cool. But yeah, that was another big win. A lot of fun.
Were you boys with the hammer? Like, is that like a stablemate, if you will, or no?
We just traveled so much together over there, and we were both wrestlers, so we naturally just got along real well. And he actually was, Kevin Randleman's coach. So when I fought Kevin, he was in the corner opposite of me. So, but it felt good to beat Kevin in the first round. So that was a lot of fun as well.
That's a huge win, former UFC heavyweight champion. I mean, he was not, knocked out Croker. I mean, he was dominating guys.
Yeah.
Just an awesome, not only pro wrestler, because I actually like some of his pro wrestling too. I thought he was great, but also an MMA fighter, just an absolute legend.
Yeah, first guy to ever take me down. I'd never been taken down before in a professional fight, and he took me down twice in that fight. And I ended up coming back and catching him in a Kimura. So lots of good memories.
How does that go down? Like, as far as you've never been taken down, like, because you're obviously fighting heavyweight, you're fighting just sometimes super heavyweight, you're fighting some big boys out there.
Absolutely. But man, he was just so fast, and he was a strong, explosive dude, and got underneath me twice. And I was on my back and fighting for my guard, which I wasn't real comfortable doing, but fought off my back for about 8 minutes, and then ended up reversing him and catching him in a key lock and tapped him out.
Are you versed in jiu-jitsu, or like, are you a big submission guy, or do you just kind of knew some holds?
No, I ended up getting a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
As I trained. Yep. So I felt real good on the mat. Never got to the point where I was super comfortable on my feet. I stood on my feet as little as I could. But as the sport evolved and progressed, you can't be a one-dimensional fighter and be successful. So I couldn't just be that ground and pound, big heavyweight, strong guy that's going to take everybody down. I had to be able to stand on my feet and throw some punches and learn how to kick. And so it was definitely a progression, but I was in the game early enough in my career back when it started. I was in UFC 19 through 25. So back when you could be just a dominant wrestler and still be successful in the sport, and you didn't have to be a professional Muay Thai kickboxer to be able to compete. So that helped me a lot.
And think about it with Randleman, some of the best Pride moments, him knocking out Krokop was legendary. And then even, again, he fell victim to the Kimura after he suplexed Fedor straight up on his head.
That was
like 360, I don't know, or 180, whatever you want to call it, suplex. Oh, my God, that was crazy.
Yeah, to see him come back from that was unreal. Everybody thought he was going to get knocked out from that. They still play that highlight often.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So good. Obviously, you did take a loss to Krokop, but he's one of the best in the world, if not, at that point, probably top 3 in the world.
Yeah, he was at the top of his game for sure, and I was one of those guys that just trained hard enough that I wasn't afraid of anybody and didn't really care. I'm picturing this fight in my head, thinking, I'm just going to take this guy down and control him on the ground, and there's no way, he's not going to catch me with a head kick, but. I was actually very surprised with Krokop on how good he was when he was on the mat, and just his hand control and being able to slip out from underneath me a couple of times, and made me work hard, and then caught me with that kick. So
it's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting, like how that could happen. It's just like, I'm going to take this guy down, and sometimes it doesn't go as you envision it as far as fight game.
Yeah, that one definitely didn't, but those ones you learn from.
Definitely. And it's funny with him too, because you think a guy kickboxer is not going to have great takedown defense. His takedown defense is great, and like he's kind of slippery on the ground somehow for a kickboxer.
Yeah, and he was smart. I mean, he knows he's going against a wrestler, so what's he going to train? He's going to train his sprawls and
Yep.
keeping his distance and not getting into my takedown range. So even when I took him down, I had to work hard to get it.
And you beat another, pretty big name in Rico, like you mentioned before, Rico Rodriguez, former champion. So, man, you've beaten a couple big time champions here.
Yeah, a couple of UFC champs. Even though I never carried the UFC championship belt, it feels good to have beaten a couple of UFC champs for sure.
That's one for the resume, if you will. Like, hey,
Right.
by the way, when they're mentioning your name, beat two former UFC heavyweight champions.
Right.
And then, you always put like, all the other champions you faced, you know what I mean? Like on the resume, that's for sure. Rico, though, two fights, right? With Rico?
Yeah, I had beat him the first time for the WEC super heavyweight championship, and then fought him again with Strike Force out in California. And man, he caught me with a punch and broke my orbital, and it just closed my eye completely. And the ref wouldn't let it go into the second round, so lost the second one. But he was a good competitor, some strong hands.
What was it like for Strikeforce? Because I feel like they had something there, like almost, and obviously with Showtime and everything, but it just never materialized. And eventually they sold the UFC. But I always felt like they had something. They almost were catching a little bit of lightning in a bottle with that promotion.
Yeah, it was. It seemed like it was an up and coming competitor for the UFC, but like you said, they just kind of fizzled out after a pretty short time. So
When you're fighting UFC or really just MMA in general, when you're leaving and you go and do pro wrestling and come back, are you like ring rust, so to speak? Or like, do you have something where, you're a little off your game just because you were pro wrestling? You know what I mean? Because you're almost trying not to kill somebody. You're not really punching too hard, maybe be a little snug, a little stiff, and then you have to come back. Like, is that a huge adjustment?
I think it was more of an adjustment for me the other way around. Like it was harder for me to get back in the squared circle and wrestle. Those guys, especially up in WWE, man, they don't like a stiff wrestler. So they want you to have a real soft touch. And, here I am, my whole life, I'm a competitive wrestler and then a UFC fighter. So that whole aspect for me was a big adjustment to just be a good worker and a light touch and protecting your opponent. So that part was a little bit hard for me. And, most of fighting is led right into my collegiate wrestling background. So that just came so easy for me that I don't feel like I missed a beat when I was actually fighting in the octagon.
Were you ever getting complaints about being too stiff out there, too snug?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The very first time I walked into the locker room and shook somebody's hand and, I gave them a UFC handshake, a firm grip like I always do. And they're like, whoa, back off, shooter. they want somebody with a real light touch, like, hey.
Yeah.
And so I got the name Shooter pretty fast.
They want you to say, hey, this guy will take care of me out there. You know what I mean? Like they don't want the rough handshake.
Yeah, nobody wants to get hurt. So they want to know that you've got a nice light touch and that you're going to protect them.
With wrestling, who was like your big kind of guy, almost like your big advocate? Would it be like a Jim Ross or would it be more like a Cornette? Like who was really kind of on your side as far as after you get signed?
I had several guys. You get an agent for every match. And actually, Chris Benoit helped me out quite a bit when I was up there, trying to mentor me in that. And one of my biggest advocates was actually Shane McMahon. He would come out and work with me before every match, and we would talk. And he would always want me to show him some MMA stuff in the ring before we would have the match for the night. And all the guys were always very respectful and very nice to me. I didn't have problems with pretty much any of them. So it was always a good environment as far as that went. Yeah.
They always say Shane was a big MMA fan too. So he definitely loves his UFC.
Yep. He was almost every match that we'd go Raw or SmackDown, and he would ask me to show him something new that day. So pull him into the ring and we'd go over some different stuff. And Undertaker was always very curious and wanted to learn stuff all the time. So it was fun getting to show those guys because, like I said, the UFC was just kind of up and coming at that time and getting its popularity. So everybody was kind of curious to see what that would look like inside the ring and what kind of moves that I could pull into the wrestling world from MMA. So it was a lot of fun to work with guys and show them that.
So interesting. Shane McMahon was really pushing for Vince to buy UFC. This was like 20 some years ago. It's when Dana White talked to Fertitta Brothers into buying UFC. And he
Yeah.
was so big into doing it, and he never did it. And what a mistake, is UFC ended up becoming so big. And Shane was always like the guy pushing for UFC and for Vince to buy it.
That's right. I remember even back then that he was a big advocate, and I mean that's what they scooped me up out of, was that UFC world. So I think they knew it was on the rise and gaining popularity. So they thought, wow, we could throw a UFC guy in here and let's see what happens.
Did you have any sort of relationship with Vince McMahon at all?
Not a lot. I spent a lot of time with Stephanie and with Shane as well, but Vince kind of kept to himself most of the time as far as me and the new talent that was coming up. He ended up obviously spending a lot of time with Brock, who was a good friend of mine.
Man, when you guys are coming up, do you sense like, hey, I'm going to make it, he's going to make it, this guy's going to make it? Like, is that any sort of sense? Because when you look at that, it's like, okay, if you sign, let's say 5 guys, you would, to me, like wrestling math, you'd be like, okay, 1 guy is going to be a star. Like when you sign a bunch of guys like that, they all kind of become stars. Like that's really wonky, crazy math. There's a great job, great signings. But do you have a sense of that? Like, wow, all these guys are going to make it, and this guy will make it.
Yeah, that group that I came up with, we would all sit around and talk about the same thing, like, which one of these guys is going to make it, which guy may not make it. And it was just, you automatically, we knew like some of the guys like John Cena, like had the gift of gab, and that guy you couldn't stump him in an interview and we would be all rolling on the ground laughing after every promo that he would cut. And you just know that, man, this guy's got to make it because he's just got such a great charisma about him. And then you got guys like Batista that they're just so big and freaky and Cornette just pushed him like crazy. So you knew that Batista was going to make it. Brock, he had probably the best development deal of anybody ever, and just bigger than life and a great collegiate wrestling, being a national champion, just like Kurt Angle and all those similarities that they had. So, that Brock's going to make it. So most of the guys, yeah, you have a pretty good feeling that they're going to be pretty successful. And in OVW at the time, they had the guys that were on developmental contracts, but then they had all of the local guys that were down there wrestling as well that you would wrestle with every week. And, occasionally you'd have one of those guys like Nick Dinsmore that would come up and get a crack at it. There's a couple more. Rob Conway made it for a short time, and some of those guys that just worked their way up and went through the system and ended up getting a crack at it. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, just to sit and we all traveled together for that full year and lived together and broke down the ring together, and you get to know each other pretty well. So it's neat to see those guys and the success that they've had in that industry. Now sitting back from where I'm at and getting to watch them. It's
Brock there, your buddy Brock, and what a freak of an athlete, because he's UFC champion. Oh, he tried out for the Vikings and he probably could have made the team almost. Like what a crazy, awesome athlete he is.
He was amazing. He was one of the only guys that I could train with because we kind of had that same work ethic and worked real hard and spent a lot of time in the gym. So him and I hit it off pretty fast and ended up spending a lot of time together in OVW. I was coming from where I was one of those guys that like, man, Brock, you've got to give this UFC thing a shot and mixed martial arts because you would be unstoppable. And so oftentimes we'd go find a mat somewhere, a wrestling mat, and we would go out and roll and train, wrestle. And we had a guy with us named Brian Keck at the time who was also on a developmental contract, and he was a a world-class wrestler. So the three of us would go find in Shelton, Benjamin sometimes. And so we would just head off and find a high school gym somewhere, and we would all just wrestle and practice MMA for hours. So it was a lot of fun to see Brock. And then his daughter is just about 30 minutes from here. She's going up to Colorado State University, where she just won her 4th national championship. So before Brock had brought her up here, they all came out to the house, and him and Sable and the family got to spend a day together. So it's been kind of cool. He's one of the guys that I've kept in touch with over the years.
That's great, because you always hear, when you see the pictures of his daughter online, you always hear like she got his genes, or you know what I mean, like she's going to be the next big thing athletically, like he was.
And she is. She's a beast, big girl, but she works hard. She's got his work ethic, and it's not about what you look like. It's up here, and she has that mental edge and that work ethic that Brock has, and that's what made Brock great. Sure, he was a natural athlete, but I mean, even back then, he could jump up on a pull-up bar and pop up 40 pull-ups at 300 pounds. And I was just like, that's just unreal that someone can do that. And then he'd be standing there in place and just do a standing bat flip and land on his feet. And again, 300-pound guy. 300-pound guys don't do that, So I'm like, God has given you some ability, buddy.
Absolutely. What is he like? Because everyone always has the impression, because when he does interviews and stuff, he's very stoic. He doesn't give you much. Even UFC, remember, he was like cursing, I'd rather drink this beer than this beer. And like, he's very funny, very comical, but you don't really see like a friendly side of the beast. You always see like angry Brock Lesnar. How is he away from all the spotlight?
He's not a people person, and I think that's what throws people off. I mean, it's not that he's not a great guy, and he's got a great heart, because he does, but he's just not a people person, and he doesn't like to be around big crowds of people, and he doesn't like people walking up to him in the middle of dinner and interrupting him. And, so we were like polar opposites in a lot of different areas, but I think that's what made us such good friends. But I always got along with Brock great, and still do to this day. And I think he's an amazing person.
What a crazy athlete, though. I know it didn't end up well with WrestleMania 19, but him doing the shooting star press, but I've seen him do it before, like flawlessly. He, for some reason, took that extra jump. I don't know why, like that extra when he didn't need to. And he just, when the initial jump off. So I think that threw it off a little bit, but I've seen him nail it like perfectly, like unbelievably.
Yeah, he used to hit it all the time in practice. And again, 300-pound guys, that's not normal.
No, he shouldn't even be coming off the top rope at that big.
No,
and he could do flips and stuff. It's crazy.
But only Brock can pull that stuff off. So more power to him.
How big were you then compared to him? Because I mean, you were pretty massive back then. So how big were you?
295, and he was 300. So we were pretty comparable. Pretty equal strength wise in the gym. So that's why we loved to train together, and we trained real hard. But that was a lot of weight to be carrying around that ring. That's for sure.
What would you lift? What would he lift?
We weren't the kind of guys that went into the gym and tried to get our maxes all the time. We're more guys that just went in there for functional fitness and lifted hard and didn't take breaks in between set. And, we'd be doing 3 things at once. So, but I would say that almost all of our lifts were very comparable, except for pull-ups. Yeah. There's no way I could do pull-ups like that guy could, but we were real comparable with weights.
So for MMA, you're probably cutting a decent, not when you're super heavyweight, but when you're at regular heavyweight, you're cutting 35 pounds there pretty much, or 30 pounds.
Yeah, I was cutting at least 20 to 25. And then like a lot of my fights were at super heavyweight, which was fortunate for me, because I'm fighting at, 280 pounds for a lot of my fights, especially over Japan where there wasn't a weight limit.
Man, just huge guys, massive guys. Heavyweights, they hit different. Everything is different, but just being that big and that dangerous is it's like a scary thing.
Yeah, it only takes that one punch to end the game early. So that's why I was one of those guys. I'm going to get in tight and get him to the mat and just play my game with him, and not take the chance of getting caught by a punch by somebody I know that I can beat on the ground. So that was pretty much always my game plan.
When you were in OVW, right? I mean, obviously you have the MMA background. Is it one of those things where they want you to be like Ron Waterman, the famous fighter, or they want to give you a different gimmick? It's during that time they kind of gave you your real name and they kind of let you be you. But it does feel like sometimes when Vince gets the hold of you, he wants to be like, oh, let's make him a cowboy, or you know what I mean? Like he just like he wants to change who the person is.
Right. And I think I was kind of at that kind of in between stage with them that they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know if I should be, the tap out MMA guy in here, or if they wanted to change and give me some kind of a new storyline. But I don't think they ever really figured that out with me.
Who was your trainer then? Was it Rip Rogers and Cornette?
Yep, those were two of them. Yep, and then Danny, he
Danny
owned the
Davis?
Danny Davis. Yeah, good. I love Danny Davis. Yeah, great guy.
I actually just talked to him not that long, about a month ago. He seemed like he's doing great down there. He retired and living in Florida.
Is he really? I haven't seen Danny for a long time. I sent him a video for his birthday, I think last year, but I haven't seen him for years.
It seemed like he's doing good. He's looking like he's loving life and just relaxing, taking it easy down there
Good
after
for him.
selling OVW.
Yeah, he was a great guy. He had a lot on his plate.
Did you have a chance to see the documentary Wrestlers
The one
about
about
OVW?
Yeah, I did. I did watch that. It's pretty interesting.
Did you like how it was done? Because it almost was like they didn't want to focus too much on OVW, the success. You know what I mean? Like when you were there, it
Right.
almost wanted to focus more on like day to
The current.
day OVW now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little bit odd. They had uh, what's his name that's running that now?
Al Snow.
Yeah, Al Snow. Yeah. He wasn't there when we were doing it, but yeah, it was kind of more about Al um, and the current crew out there, which is just a lot different. But yeah, I expected that they would focus a little bit more on the guys that gave OVW a name, which was pretty much that class that I came up with. And they did. They referred back to them a little bit, but not much.
Did they ever reach out to you for it or no?
They didn't. No one ever contacted me about it.
Surprise you at all? It's kind of one of the, I don't know. I would think like everybody of that era would have been reached out
Yeah,
to.
I would have definitely accepted the invitation and would have loved to talked or gone out there or done some stuff for them, but it's all right.
So with that, who were some of your favorite guys to work down there in OVW?
Oh man. I think one of the guys that just helped everybody down there at the time was a local, which was Nick Densmore, just because he had been with OVW since the start and helped a bunch of people. And but when I was down there, Bobby Eaton was a big help. He was one of the guys that kind of took me under his wing and worked with me a lot. So I had a couple of big matches with Bobby, and he was a big part of who I was when I was down there, as far as helping coach athletes.
Love Bob, beautiful Bobby, one of the best, very under the radar, very underrated. Oh, one of the all time greats, easily.
Yeah, and such a good guy. He had a great heart.
Any of the other guys like stick out, like Orton or even Sean O'Hare? I think was down there right around that time, or didn't he?
Yeah, Sean was there for quite a while with us, and for sure, yeah. I mean, those guys. It was just such a talented group that for anyone to really stand out, it was hard in that group because we've got just a whole room full of studs. So you're pretty much just another wrestler, in the room at the time. And then Big Show ended up spending a lot of time down there with us because I think WWE wanted to get him to lose a little bit of weight. So he ended up spending a lot of time with us down there as well. And Mark Henry was with us the whole time when we were down there.
Is that a lot of pressure though? If there's that many good guys?
Yeah, and that's one of those jobs that you're always job scared, and you never really have that security that, man, I've got this made. You always feel like you're one match away from getting a pink slip, and in that environment, I mean, guys were getting pink slips every week, so you're watching them come and watching them go, um, all the time. So yeah, it's definitely one of those environments that you never are comfortable and relaxed and say, oh, this is just another match, because every match has to be your best match.
When they call you up to the main roster, you're in WWF, so to speak. Is
Yeah.
it technically a call up? Like, are you being called up, and like, how does that kind of come up, and how does that go down?
Yeah, you get called up to travel, so you're basically just doing dark matches at first and traveling all over, wherever the show is. You're doing house shows with them, but then for Raw and SmackDown, you're doing a dark match, and you find out 30 minutes before you go out there and wrestle who you're going to wrestle against, and you've got 25-30 minutes with an agent to put a match together. And again, it's just one of those things that you're always super nervous, because you're being watched backstage, every single move you make, and they're trying to decide, well, should we keep this guy or not keep this guy?
What
So a
did
lot.
you? Oh, sorry. What did you think of that whole thing? Because it's almost like I'm getting paid here, but you make it to the main roster, right? You get a even more of a pay. You're getting a bump up. Like, what were you thinking at that point?
um, I don't know. I felt pretty confident, just because I felt like I was working just as hard and doing just as well as guys like Brock and John and Cena and Orton and stuff. We worked together so much that I didn't feel like there was big differences between any of us. Um, so it was a little bit, it was definitely an adjustment when I got my pink slip after being in there for a couple of years. But looking at it now, I mean, that's exactly what the Lord wanted for me to happen, is give me that platform and then send me out on the road and get to share the gospel. And so it's easy for me to sit back now and look at it and say, man, this worked out just like it was supposed to.
Is that a surprise? Like when you get it though, like because you have the look, you're being used, right? You're technically on the road. I mean, what's the reason, and what, like you said, was it a huge shock?
It was a shock. Time you maybe understand, it's uh, but that was where I was. Of course, I was the and making it a huge success out of it. But like I said, I totally understand now and see exactly what was happening in my life, and it worked out like it was supposed to.
Man, like to me, it's like, man, this guy's got the look. I remember even like seeing you, reading about you, and also it's like, wow, Andy's an MMA guy, and it just seemed like, I don't know, like a mistake on their part, if you will. I know it's hard to like comprehend for a fan like that that's just following it, but to me, it's like, oh man, that guy had it. It seemed like.
Yeah, you're never supposed to read your own press, but I was reading all the things that were getting put out there, and a lot of those magazines at the time were, putting me above Brock and all those guys and saying, man, this guy had, way more athleticism and looked way better in the ring than, Severn and even Shamrock, and this guy's gonna make it. And then all of a sudden, bam, and you find out. So yeah, it was hard at first. It's a big shock to the ego, but that's ego to me stands for edging God out. I think that's exactly what I was doing.
Oh, I've never heard that before. That's is that an H2Oism, or is that something you learned?
The guys on Team Impact that I travel with, the Christians, we would always use that phrase. Ego stands for edging God out.
It's kind of true if you think about it in a way. You're putting yourself above God.
put yourself first. That's exactly what happens. So when I started putting God first in my life, everything started working out, and everything started falling in line like it's supposed to.
So with like getting the release, is that like whose call is that? Is that a Vince call? Is that a Johnny Ace call? Like, do you even know like whose call that is?
You never find out, but I think ultimately it was probably a Vince call. I know him and I think Hunter and Stephanie. I think they all have their little meetings, all the time, and it was probably decided at one of those board meetings that they would have weekly who's going to stay this week and who's going to go. And but you never really find out the real reasons. You just hear that there's not a storyline and on to the next guy.
And Vince doesn't really seem like a big MMA guy at all. Like he doesn't really seem like he knows much about it.
Yeah, I don't think he was a big fan at the time. If he's not now, I mean, he should be, because those, they're drawing big numbers as well. So it's
Yeah.
great to have that dual market. And without that, you're hurting yourself.
So as we hit the line here and head towards the finish, like in the world of WWE, who is like some of your favorite guys to work with there? Like, do you have some favorite opponents just from your time in WWE?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time wrestling with a lot of the, pretty much the middle class guys at the time. But, Rico Constantino was another guy we haven't mentioned that was in that same class. And Rico and I got along real well. We ended up having a lot of matches together. And Randy and I had, wrestled in Madison Square Gardens several times against each other. And, but even up when I got up and started wrestling against some of the WWE talent, like Scotty 2 Hotty, we had some good matches and had some fun times. So I got along with all the guys just because that's my personality and that's who I am. So I loved all those guys, and there was very few of them that rubbed me the wrong way and that weren't very respectful and nice to me. And that's kind of uncommon as someone new trying to fit into the business, because it's very it's one of those things where you have to kind of earn your keep to be one of the boys in the locker room. And there's a lot of politics that people don't see, but they always treated me very respectfully.
Do you have a favorite match from New Japan Pro Wrestling? Because when you were over there, you had a huge match in the Tokyo Dome against Great Muta, Keiji Muto. So, I mean, do you have some like fond memories and favorites of over in Japan?
I really don't. It was just kind of a weird time for me, just coming out of WWE and traveling over there. And it was a lot different style in New Japan. It's a lot more, it's not so much of the light touch. They want you to make this look as real as you can. And with me coming out of a mixed martial arts background, they wanted me to, make this look like it was a legitimate MMA fight out there. So that's what I ended up doing in a lot of my matches over in New Japan. But not a lot of those really stood out to me. I mean, there was a couple of fun matches, but it all kind of blends together.
Yeah. Tokyo Dome's huge though, especially against Muta, one of the the biggies. So that's a big one. That's another one for the resume, right?
Yeah, for sure. I know he ended up cutting my nose, and I had to go back and get stitches after the after the match in the locker room.
Was he worried at all at that point?
Was he worried? I don't
Yeah.
think. I
Oh
don't
no.
think. Yeah.